Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 432. It is the last day of the week, aka the Big Bang Attack workout. I'm feeling very good right now, very excited for this workout. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. Good and Evil Part 8. What makes you think you're good? What makes you think you're evil? So in today's episode, I wanted to discuss both sides of this because I think that a lot of the basis of why I wanted to start this entire series, just besides the entire looking at the two scales of good and evil, was the fact that I think a lot of people underestimate the evil that they do in the world and overestimate the amount of good that they do in the world. Somewhere in the middle is more along the lines of where we're at. But if we're going to take this from where I'm thinking of it to and hold your hand to that, I think that we'd have to start somewhere at the extremes like I've done in the series past. But I think that this particular episode is more of a self-reflective ideal, or idea in the entire spectrum of things when it comes to good and evil. Because I think that the issue with it is that I feel like when talking, or at least witnessing when people are doing things out, not necessarily just in the world in general, they believe that they are doing it in a sense of altruism for their own self, right? So they are doing something for the betterment of themselves or because they are the good guy in their story. But that begs the question as to why do you think you're good? And then if you ask a lot of people that, then you'd probably get a bunch of blank stares. There are a few people that would actually answer with some type of religious ideation or some religious backing or some other type of altruistic idea of what would be good, But then when you look at it, and you just start picking it apart, and it's kind of like, oh, I donate to blank, or I give my time to volunteering to blank, or whatever. It's like, all right, but you still eat meat. It's like, all right, if I change my worldview ever so slightly, even just to fit it into your worldview, you're technically harming X, Y, or Z. You are doing something within your own worldview that isn't necessarily even good. So then why do you think you're good? How do you know your depths of evil if you've never even asked yourself that? If you think you're all good and done nothing wrong. So it's just an interesting facet to look at in general, because I think that a lot of people really do think that they're better than they actually probably are. And I'm not to say here to shit on everybody, because I don't think I'm necessarily that good in the grand scheme of things. But at the same time, I could at least acknowledge where my evil aspects are. And I think that that's the trouble a lot of people have with this entire idea, because you can be a generally good person and do occasionally abhorrent type of things. This happens. Or, which is the thing that a lot of people, and probably the main thing that we'll be talking about, the ability to do abhorrent things. I think that a lot of people underestimate how much they are willing to be able to be bent, really, by their moral systems, because realistically, they've never really established where each boundary is. So I think that that's the big thing about this episode. I wanted to just talk about it because I think this is an issue, and it's a massive one that no one really wants to talk about, because I think it generally then you start getting into harder questions, because then you have to start asking yourself, or you have to start asking people, well, who are you? You know what I mean? What are your belief systems? And that is a whole host of issues, but we'll talk about that and a lot of other stuff when we get to Mother Base. All right, so start this day off with single arm lat pull down, which is pretty good. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand for today. Good and Evil Part 8. What makes you think you're good? What makes you think you're evil? So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because I think that I was listening to something somewhere, either a podcast or a YouTube video where that was talking about how people get their ideals from things like Disney movies or Marvel movies and all these things that come up. And then the idea came to my mind where this is the morality systems that many people take nowadays, as they haven't really established some type of other religious morality or some type of self made code within themselves that shows the good and evil on their side, but instead will take things from movies and pop culture and shows and all these other things, comic books, and throw them into their own life, making that their moral code, the moral code of these other characters, without actually establishing what is their own morality. And I think that that's the biggest issue I guess I would have with it, is because when you actually ask the person, what are they doing this for? What are your beliefs? What is your actual system of beliefs as to why you believe these things? And why is this good? Why is this bad? I think that getting into something like that seems like such a far cry from whatever anybody actually wants to think about when it comes to good and evil, whether it be something as simple as, why do you eat meat? It's something that if I was a vegan, I can turn that around and say you're hurting animals and all this other stuff, which I don't necessarily agree with, but also at the same time, I understand where they're coming from, because I do believe that's part of my evil in a certain sense. And I think reflecting back at it, and not even just going outward, but more inward, I can understand that there are parts of me that are good and parts of me that are evil. It's just as simple as that. But the thing is, I know within my morality where I would stand, and it would be towards the good, but I know of the evil that I am capable of, which is not something that many people can say, because they are scared of the evil, because they have been conditioned by popular media in order to be afraid of all evil and or to shun all evil, when in reality it is something that all people are capable of. It is just making sure that it does not take you over. People that end up having this shield against the evil within them is something that can cause a corruption where you only see good in some certain things that you do, but at a certain point there has to be a balancing act to it, because at a certain point, if you go too good, you're just going to pop up on the other side. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but at the same time, if you think you're doing something for the greater good without actually consulting anybody, that's how you get into mass extinction type of things. If you get hyper focused on one exact thing, the end goal, it will be something like mass genocide. I mean, if you're thinking that, oh, hey, this person is bad for the environment, let me just take them out. That's how it usually goes, because if you just continue going on, you're just going to keep perpetuating it. And then if you're going to say, oh, no, but they wouldn't do that because that would be evil and they don't want to commit that. But that's the thing, because they are unwilling to acknowledge the evil within them, they wouldn't even know that the act of murder is bad. So they cannot align the two thoughts together. And that's why it is good to at least understand why you are good and why you are evil. I've been wanting to make this episode for a while because it is something that fascinates me. I think that a lot of people truly believe that they are on the side of good, when in reality, they might just be neutral. They might not understand what good they are giving out into the world. There might not be that good, honestly. And the question is, what is representative of what is good and evil is obviously very isn't necessarily an easy question to answer, but at least some people will try. Others will just subjugate themselves to do things like, or saying things like, I give homeless people money, or I do X act that is good, or Y act that is seen as good, or whatever. They'll do something like that to shun away, instead of being like, instead of saying something like, oh, I provide help for others. Relatively blanketed statements, but there is no necessarily substance to them. And I think that that's the issue. I think that when you go into something like good, I could say that for me personally, what are some acts of good that I do? I try to be as cleanly as humanly possible wherever I can be. I try to, I am a friend of animals wherever I can help them directly. If I can, I'm trying to make the world around me a better place. Where am I evil? I know that my anger and temper can rise at a moment's notice. I understand that sloth can get the best of me at moments. And I understand that I can be a wasteful person. And so I'm trying to commit to changing that. But a lot of people won't decide that. They will
will think that all they do is good. And there are the other people who will think that all they do is evil. But that's a little bit more rare, because you'll understand that most of the people who think that they are evil really are just pessimistic types of people who have their own set of issues, and maybe not even a soul, but that's a different story for a different day. I think that when it comes to this, it's just a questioning of what is your moral system and who are you within this world in order to decide what you are doing is good for the world, and what is the world in your mind. Because if the world is just everybody all at once, then you're going to have to do waves of massive things in order to really put your foot forward into whatever you think is good, But if your world is you, your family, your friends, and your close ones, then maybe you doing good does not have to be so crazy, extravagant, or grand world changing. And I think that the view and aspect of the best that you can be within your own small world is better than trying to do something out into the grander scheme of the world, because there are too many forces out there trying to make it so you feel like you are doing evil upon everybody else rather than just you doing good within your own little circle. So that's why I also wanted to talk about this. I feel like a lot of people have such more grandiose ideas of the outside world, of what they can do out there. For example, trying to be the best, having like the smallest carbon footprint that you could possibly have, when in reality, someone takes a private jet somewhere and just nullifies every single thing that you do. But for some reason, you're willing to make you and your family suffer because you think that you're doing good in the world, even though in reality, you are just made null and void in half a second of a flight somewhere of the west coast of the United States. You've just made it so you suffer in the evils that someone else does. And I think that getting into that grand scope of something like environmentalism, not that there's anything wrong with it, but that grand scope of it, you have to shut it down, or at least bring it into a reality base of something that makes more sense for you within the world rather than the entirety of the world. People will grandiose themselves way too much to think that they are fighter for whatever belief they are in, when in reality they're not the fighter for whatever belief they are in. They are nothing more than a pawn in somebody else's game. And I think that looking at least into your own morality beliefs, you can understand that maybe you're good, maybe you're not good, maybe you're not evil, but maybe you're just being used by someone else, and figuring out who that is probably better than sitting there and pretending that you're something that in reality you're not even close to being.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed, none. Exercises skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, back to the main subject matter for today. Good and Evil Part 8. Are you really good? Are you really evil? So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because I think that people end up missing this entire point, really, because you can do evil things in the world. You can also do good things in the world. But if you don't establish some type of morality system, or at least where the borders are between whatever it is, you are just a mishmash of a person, really. And no one will really understand you, / what is your viewpoint? What are you fighting for? What are you doing in this world, And then that leads to a whole host of conundrums and interesting ideals and figuring out what the hell you're doing in your own world, because a lot of people don't want to figure that out. This is a question that is beyond them. This is something that they don't want to think about, because if thinking about it means that they have to actually stand for something and deny something. You know what I mean? And it's very frustrating, because they will take their sensibilities of what good and evil is from things that they've consumed rather than their own actual opinion about things. Now, of course, these things do influence ourselves and most people. Of course, that's the point of them. But the thing is, if we know what media is like, especially nowadays, they try to push the boundaries of what is acceptable and what isn't, right? But that's why we have stories that are very endearing throughout all of human history that pop up every once in a while that are relatively good arbiters for what is some morality system, regardless of where you're at, you know? That's why certain things will kind of go throughout cultures. It doesn't necessarily matter per se, but each culture has some type of morality system that they work within. I think that today, since we live in such a hodgepodge of a society here, at least in America, you're ending up getting a bunch of groups of people that don't really have one connected viewpoint on something, and it makes it so things are frustrating, especially when you're dealing with others who more likely than not think they're doing good, but in reality they don't even know what good is, and then thus they are just basically killing themselves or throwing themselves to the cause that doesn't really actually care about them. They don't realize, or they don't think about it from the inside out. They think about it from the outside going to in, and that's just horrible in the sense that they just become useful idiots to this group that doesn't necessarily care about them. They are literally scum because they don't care. But that's the thing, because they never established a morality of what it is for them, they cannot see that. They can only see what they believe is good in their own eyes, when in reality it's not necessarily that good. You know, how good can a group of people that want you dead be? How is helping them, regardless of what could happen to you, be a good thing for the rest of the world? You don't even have to go that far out, because who cares about the rest of the world when your family and your friends and your pets are your world? I think that people make it so that they try to make these bigger than life idealations about what they are doing about the whole world and like what is good, what they want to see in the world, when in reality their own world is shit. You know, you look at all of the hypocritical people that end up talking the big game, but yet as soon as they step out the front door, it's all gone. The person that's eco-friendly maniac that has to get their Starbucks every day. You know, it's like there are certain little things that just pick at the soul, and then they end up never really reconciling it, and then wondering why they kind of feel empty in this world, because they never actually decided to stand for something. They die 1,000 deaths from 1,000 cuts to the soul, and then thus they're fucked. They really don't understand what's going on. And then when they later on in life, when they're having a crisis wherever it is, because at age it doesn't kind of necessarily matter, they will end up trying to find themselves when they should have been doing that in the first place like 20 years ago. And then it's too late. You are just fucked at that point. And good luck if you do find yourself at that point. But more likely than not, the one thing that probably a lot of those people have, which a lot of older people have, in common, is probably regret in some type of way, shape, or fashion, because they didn't learn who they were early in life, because they chose to either forego it, or they were misled into letting go of it and allowing others to influence their soul, and then thus they're fucked. Hopefully, though, they can find some type of salvation, whatever that means to them later in life. But then again, who knows? Who knows? And there are some people out there that never find this, that never find the idea of who they are actually within this world, and instead just live on passively, just accepting what's happening to them, never being only a passenger to their own story, not realizing that at the end of the day, they might just be leading to a car crash. You know, it just is a very sad state of affairs, especially those types of people. But we'll get to them in a different episode. But with that being said, tell me what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. This was kind of, well, I love talking about good and evil, and this one's been on the mind for quite some time. So please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay safe out there and stay warm, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.